Yeah. And also things are changing. Like the best practices you had like 10 years ago are not the ones that are relevant today. Things have changed dramatically with the move to the cloud, with adopting microservices. Also with what you mentioned, like when you're building an application today, it's not 100% proprietary code.
Okay, so today we have with us Or Weis. Or have started his journey in the IDF as a software engineer, where he served and finished his service as an army officer. And 10 years ago, in 2012, he co founded his first company, Reactful. Along the way, he also was a consultant, a director, a software architect, and how not, of course, a CTO. In 2017, he co founded Rookout, where he still remains on the company's board. Um, his most recent and actually ongoing adventure is with Premit.io, which he's also co founded and now serve as a CEO. From hearing his talks and listening to interviews, I can say that he's really passionate about what he's doing. Actually, he's also embraced the fact that he's a geek, starting from tech and moving to culture, science fiction, writing, history, biology, and general trivia. And I also heard that he's working on a novel nowadays about permissions and identity and access management. I hope I said it right. Um, and we also have Tomer Bornea, our constant amazing guest, who is also the CEO and co-founder of Novo. So, hi, Tomer and Or. How are you doing, guys?
Great. It's really good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Um, Thanks for that preamble and background. That's probably more words than I deserve. But again, thank you, and I'm just happy to be here and chat with you.
Happy to join, and thank you all for joining us.
So, before we will actually dive into a real interesting conversation that I believe that we will have, Orchid, could you share maybe something like small, briefly about something that kind of special that you are doing in life? Maybe some hobbies, anything?
Yeah, sure. So I think you maybe it can connect to something that you already mentioned. So I really like reading science fiction and books in general, and so I also try and write a bit of my own. So I have two unfinished science fiction books. I have like 70% of both of them, and uh, I'm now working on a new one that I'm kind of trying to align with the world of permissions, the book that you mentioned. And I actually have I think it can be a very interesting book, and I'm hoping that by aligning it with the actual job that I have, I can actually get myself to finish it. But we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, actually, you got me real interested here, but unfortunately, it's not the the scope of this interview and episode. Okay, so as it turns out, we have an amazing opportunity to look at two companies which were founded around the same time, or I mean, sort of, if we look in this like in a big picture. Both of them has two co-founders, got almost a similar seed funding, and were built with not little amount of open source aspects. Yet there is a difference, and I would really like to explore it. So, or could you maybe start explaining or just sharing what Permit.io is?
Yeah, of course. So, Pyramid is all about permission. So, any developer building a product has to have access control as part of the product. Roles, user management, API key management, secrets management, audit logs, impersonation. These are things that you've seen in a billion applications a billion times. And the sad story is, every time you saw that, some poor schlep of a developer had to create them from scratch. I myself ended up rebuilding these five times in a company that wasn't even 3 years old with my previous venture, Rookout. And looking back throughout my career, I've probably built this 1,000 times, and at no point did I want to do this. And yet it keeps on coming. So instead of constantly building this on your own and making a lot of mistakes like I did, we provide a solution off the shelf that you can bake into your software so you can focus on actually building your product. It's based on open source, as we kind of touched on, with OPA and Opal, our own open source project, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about in a second. And you get all the experiences that you need both for yourself, your other stakeholders, and even your end customers on top of that that are ready to use. It works with policy as code. You push it in a Git repository, but you don't have to write code. You have the option, but the main thing is you don't have to. That's the story in gist.
The amount of times I've built authorization into all of our solutions, that is just
Yeah, and the thing with this is that it tends to be surprising. Like a lot of times, I myself thought, okay, I've built the best solution. I've got both R back and A back, and I've got a lot of controls, and this is perfect. I'm done. And then you get kind of a curveball, like with Rookout, we had Cisco, who were selling the product. They were like, now we want to have our own back office. We want to manage the users. We onboard on our own. And I was like, how the hell am I going to create two separate back offices for this thing? I didn't plan for this. Okay, throw this out the window, start from scratch. Yeah, everyone starts kind of the naive approach, like even before you plan for it, everyone starts with like admin, not admin. So I'm the admin as the developer, and fuck all the rest of you. Pardon my French. And then you go, and then they tell you, we need some of the other people in the organization to be able to control some things. And then you go to from not admin to admin, not admin, and super admin. And then you have access control list, and then role based access control, and then role based access control with ownership. And it constantly evolves. And the thing is, it's really hard to imagine it because you don't want to spend time imagining this. You have better things to do. So you end up kind of neglecting it. And also, there's a lot of confusing stuff. Like even just the fact that authorization and authentication sound the same or written the same gets people confused when they're reading docs, when they're trying to implement this, where they're trying to find the right solution. And it actually gets deeper. Like the within authentication, like HTTP authentication, there's a header called authorization header, but it's not authorization. You put in the JSON Web Token, which is authentication. You use it for authorization, but it's not that. So a lot of people get confused.
hey, we need to give him some credit. It was written like what, like 25 years back. So a lot of those, yeah, a lot of those concepts wasn't as they are today. But no, I think I definitely get what you're saying, and I think a lot of times it's not only a question of imagining this. There's a lack of known best practices. There's like 25 different best practices solutions, which means there aren't none, because you can't have 25 of them. And then when engineers kind of try to tackle the actual issue by themselves, they end up, okay, that is way too complicated. So what do you say? You need an admin? There you go, an admin.
And also things are changing. Like the best practices you had like 10 years ago are not the ones that are relevant today. Things have changed dramatically with the move to the cloud, with adopting microservices. Also with what you mentioned, like when you're building an application today, it's not 100% proprietary code. It's not even 100% open source code that you adopt. A significant percentage of modern applications today are third-party services, are distributed data planes that you need to connect to. So just covering that distributed space, all your microservices, all your elements at edge, all the different services you need to connect with, that can create a very complex playing field that, unless you really understand what you do and unless you have the up to date best practices and you know which ones are actually relevant, you're going to have a bad time, essentially.
So, how actual founders and maybe, I mean, people that just starting their journey, how they could they plan, or like the real word is to architect their code and how they going to build this? How could they prepare something to be or scalable or just looking toward the future of the company and kind of prepare everything to go along with it?
Yeah. So that's a terrific question. So I think the first thing we want to put on the table is you don't want to spend too much time on this. You want to spend time on actually building your product. You want to spend time actually researching your market. And you don't actually know, even within the permissions or authorization space, you don't know which actual elements of it you're going to need in your specific product. So the idea is not to try and have everything with all the best practices and all the capabilities from day one, but have the groundwork to be able to ramp up to things as you need them without having to go back to square one, at least not too many times back to square one. And the best practices that I mentioned are a really good key element to do that. And also, instead of reinventing the wheel, adopting open source projects, adopting existing solutions is a surefire way to save friction on these areas. But I think, again, it's mostly if you decouple your policy from your code, meaning you don't embed the authorization layer within your application, it will be flexible enough for upgrades and you'll be able to upgrade it separately from the application itself. Essentially, what I'm saying is create a separate microservice for authorization instead of having it hard coded within your app. And that will give you at least 80% flexibility. The other part is understanding who's going to be consuming this. So it's obviously yourself as a developer managing the application, but it's also ops, obviously, but product managers, security, compliance, and the customers themselves and your partners. They are going to need interfaces to control this. So I wouldn't recommend building all of these interfaces from day one if you're doing this on your own, but you should definitely plan for it. Definitely leave room, create an interface within your for within that microservice for authorization that you can layer those experiences on top. So when people come in asking for them, and they will come in asking for them, it will be easier work to do. You just add it on top instead of going and refactoring everything.
Right. The one thing I want to add about that is, um, even if you are planning to build everything by yourself, and that might be correct about authorization or maybe other things, other building blocks you plan to reinvent, please go ahead, read a bit, find some of those open source best practices, and try and copycat a lot of them. Not because you're a copycat, because those open source are being built by hundreds of engineers worldwide with a lot of ideas, a lot of best practices they already did, a lot of experiences which they already paid for. Most usually by eating too much pizza, drinking too much coffee, and forfeiting a couple of nights of sleep. So it is an actual experience. So try and copycat.
So something that I really love seeing as a kind of a pattern. I don't know if I love it or not, but it's just it gives you some kind of a guide to the fact that when you have a problem that it's not even a problem, you don't see it as a problem, you just see as you see it as a recurring task that you need to do again and again and again in different places and in different companies and different kind of code structures. It means that something should be invented or you need to find it because probably someone already invented it. So this is I really like to see that companies and software as a service kind of companies rising up from this particular pattern. And it's just really interesting to see it again and again. So or right now I would like to hear a bit more, and I believe that you have enough kind of depth into it uh, to hear about OPA and a bit maybe Opal, if you.
Yeah, of course. So when we started Permit, we definitely didn't want to reinvent the wheel too much. We wanted to build it on good foundations and good open source uh, and those best practices that I mentioned. So there are a couple projects out there, but we really thought that OPA, Open Policy Agent, is the most mature out of the bunch. OPA is a general purpose decision engine. You load policies into it in the form of code, aka that policy is code that we mentioned before. The code is in a language called Rego, which is a derivative of Datalog, which in turn is a derivative of Prolog. So it's a logical programming language. And you load data into it in the form of JSON documents. And then you can basically send queries to it asking, can use Y? Can this user interact with that feature? Does that user have the right permissions? Does that user have the right quota? Stuff like that. Um, and While it's a general purpose decision engine, it really came to fame within the Kubernetes space for mainly as part of Gatekeeper. And it's used mainly for infrastructure access control. So service to service authorization and admission control within Kubernetes. um, we wanted to take it to the application level. In the infrastructure level, things change mainly at the pace of CI/CD as things are being deployed. But at the application level, things change much more rapidly. A user invites another user. A user buys another feature in the system. A user changes the settings. A lot of those impact permissions immediately in real time. So we needed a way to manage OPA in scale in a distributed manner with a distributed data plane in real time with the changes of the application. I'll give an example. Let's say you want a policy like only users that have paid for a feature can use it. That bit of information of who paid for something, that's not even part of your own application. That's a third party service like Stripe, ChargeBee, or PayPal. So you want that information to propagate in real time when someone swipes their credit card immediately into the authorization layer. So when they come and actually interact with the system, they gain access. If they don't, they'll be annoyed because they just paid for it and you should allow them to use it. So that event-driven real-time aspect is critical for the application layer and for having good performance and good experiences for our end users. So for that, we created Opal, Open Policy Administration Layer. Opal is a open source project that layers on top of OPA and manages it in scale with a pub sub real-time event channel that allows Opal clients, which sit next to the OPA agents themselves, and manage them to subscribe to different topics, both for policy and data, and update OPA in real time. So, for example, you can track policy directly from a Git repository. So let's you want to change the policy. It's policies, code, version with all the best practices, test, benchmarking. You push it into a branch in Git. Opal tracks that, immediately gets a webhook, for example, from GitHub, and immediately propagates a new policy to the different agents that subscribe to it. And with data, it's essentially what I described with Stripe or any other solution. You have a webhook propagating in saying there's new data to be had regarding this topic, for example, billing, and that gets translated in real time into events that propagate to the relevant clients, which each in its turn goes to the data source and fetches the data and loads it into its cache. In the meantime, it is aware, even before it gets the actual data, it's aware of the change. So your policy can take into account that kind of interim state. And one of the cool things about this architecture is that you don't upload the data to the Opal server. There's kind of a need to know basis. Only the clients that actually need the data access the data. And the data never is centralized in a core space. We really put a lot of security and better architecture designs into Opal. And that's also something that comes into value with us in Permit, where we use both OPA and Opal, because that allows our customers to use Permit without actually loading their data into our cloud. Um, so we're really big on security, privacy, high availability. Also, the Opal clients and Opal instances continue to function regardless if the Opal server is up or not, or if Permit is up or not. Yeah, so that's OPA and Opal in a gist.
Something that kind of really hooked me when I was doing the research for this episode was something that you call Open Foundation. It means that Opal, the open source library, is open core, and that's what people can touch and do whatever they want with it. However, using the security level or layer, I think the layer. It basically means that it's only run by companies' employees. So I would like to understand how you see this different and how you differentiate this between open core and open foundation.
First, I think I'll kind of start with the example of Permit and what it looks there, and then I can go back to the general case. and why I think it's important nowadays. So with Permit, we have Opal and we have Permit itself. Permit uses both OPA and Opal, which are completely open source. There's nothing within those projects that is not completely public and accessible with open source license to everyone. But Permit itself is not completely open source. And more importantly, the value proposition of Opal and the value proposition of Permit are not the same. Permit is a full stack permission solutions. It gives you all the interfaces and experiences you need to manage your permissions for your product. Opal, on the other hand, is an infrastructure component. It's a channel for you to update your policy agents in real time. Obviously, Permit enjoys or benefits from Opal. It uses it as part of its infrastructure, but they're not the same thing. They're not the same value proposition. They're not the same product. They're not the same anything. They just rely on one another. Opal is a foundation to build Permit on top. And other people can build things like Permit on their own on top of Opal. Um, the key here is to, in my mind, is to have a clear line between what we open source and what we provide as our kind of commercial product, and have alignment between them. Specifically with open core, I think it can that overexposure can actually can create a lot of negativity, both for yourself, for the developers of the open source project, and for the people using it. With Docker. So Docker, also a rocket ship that really changed the cloud development world. They built an open source project, really grew with it, basically consumed the entire space, became leaders. But when they came to the point where they needed to convert their open source project into an actual business, they had a really hard time. And then they did this double stupid mistake and tried to recap on that. They tried to reframe what's open source and what's not. And they basically antagonized their own community. They got kicked out of the CNCF. They no longer are a default part of Kubernetes. And they basically, while they're making some money now, they're basically struggling, and they'll never, probably never, regain the fame that they had and the good standing with the community that they had.
So I think that what you just said here is that kind of giving the fact that if a company or an open source project started to do something kind of open and transparent and everything is accessible, then it's also kind of brings the risk of other companies such as, I don't know, Amazon to take their open source code and to develop a microservices, and then to pivot this and kind of regain the um, the control of the code and just deny access and put a paywall to users that actually used your project before is even worse and kind of just adding to all this kind of a nightmare. So yeah, I just wanted to put an emphasis on this because it's really important to uh,
Yeah, to clarify, yeah.
But I think looking into a lot of what you're saying over open core model, I think we've witnessed since 2010 a lot of changes as to since 2010 open core became the the extended solution of open core became a SaaS offering, which is significantly better than the on-prem there was up until then, because now you can license based on usage and not on just the licensing. It becomes extremely more, I would say, um, it's significantly easier to move from one offering to the other because there's a hosted version. As Emil mentioned earlier, DevOps become one of the best reasons why you would buy that. Now, in that regard, a lot of the Amazons of the world could win you in a heartbeat. And you need to be aware, is your solution a good enough solution to be able to monetize on DevOps while not being an infrastructure layer enough for the AWSs of the world to take you, which is not an easy task to realize. Now, With that being said, I think a lot of the new open core businesses are saying from day one, you know what, we are a commercial open source company. Take that into account. We're not going to release everything into the open source, but we are going to put a lot of it out there. Now, it might be code available, but not necessarily open source, right? You might be able to read the code, but you won't be able to use that as you want. I think the guideline is you as an open source vendor need to be, and sorry, you as a commercial open source company need to be upfront about it and say, you know what, I'm a commercial open source company. That's what I'm doing. My guidelines are blah blah blah. I'm going to release as much as I can and work as much as I can on the open source project, which we're all aligned on. You're going to be able to see everything I'm doing on that regard. I am going to put an extended offer on top of that. That one is going to be commercialized. I'm saying that from day one. I'll be more than happy to see you as part of it. But it is, an open source business.
So one of the things that I really think that could be a metaphor for an actual open source that brings a value to developers is basically a Lego part, something that you can just take and put it on your project, put it on other project, and use it as a sum part, like something that you will build upon or will build under, and it's just something that you can use and manipulate with in any way you can or want. Um, so I don't know if we could really get into it, but I really would love to at least touch it slightly. Um, and this is about the go to market strategy. What is your go to strategy here? And it probably kind of lays on the target audience that you kind of trying to probably attract, but how do you approach it?
So, first of all, in kind of quick summary, our go to market motion is bottom up, product led growth, PLG, focused on developers. So, developers are the main people we work with. Our product is almost immediately valuable for the rest of the stakeholders, like the product managers, security, compliance, the end customers themselves. But we exclusively focus on the developers. um, we just focus on the commercial offering with Permit. As part of our community, as part of promoting Opal, we obviously focus on those when we focus on those, but with Permit, we focus on the SaaS offering, or at least the service offering. Um, and I don't think people have a problem with that. People are, if you provide them with a good product that works and you enable them to use it, especially when you have a free tier, and we have a very I'd say generous free tier with up to 1,000 monthly active users. I don't think people object to that model. Sometimes they'd prefer if it be completely open source, but I think they appreciate the fact that we're upfront and clear about where we draw our boundaries. It's kind of like we described before, and what we guide people to do, or where ideally we want people, what we want people to do when they come to our website is to go into the product itself. With self-service, you just go into, there's like, you can click on get started. There's like 1,000 buttons that say get started. I'm joking, there's like five. And then you can immediately just try the product, try the best practices that come with it, build it into a demo application or even your production application. And we see it work really well. We see people coming off the internet, not talking to us at all, which is kind of cool, and taking this within a couple of days, couple of weeks into their production applications. By the way, we're also seeing a lot of people actually do talking to us, but it's usually after they played a bit with the product, and then they come in with questions about features or upcoming capabilities or pricing or whatever is important to them at that point in time. And every time I talk to people, when they reach out, I don't necessarily know if they want to talk. Sometimes they write. So there's a Calendly link on our website, and if you, and to all the listeners, if you want to talk to me, you all you need to do is just grab a time there, and I'll be there for sure. I love talking to our engineers always, and our security practitioners. Um, So when you come in, you can write in the comments if you want to talk about Opal, you want to talk about permit. But even if you say you want to talk about permit, I'll tell you at the beginning of the conversation. I can help you with three things. I can help you with best practices. I can just share what my experiences and help you build this on your own. I can help you with the open source projects, our own or others that we can recommend. And obviously, we have our SaaS offering. And for me, being a developer myself, it's really about again, it's about alignment, and it's about having good relationships with people. Like I want to give you and help you what you need. I don't want to force you to use something you don't care about. Like the thing that I hate the most is getting like cold emails or LinkedIn messages or whatever. Oh, you have to try our new product, but I don't need this. I'm focusing on other things. And I truly believe if you bring people real value and it's relevant for them, they'll use it anyway. You don't need to force yourself on people. That's so 2001. Let's stop doing that and relate to people as people. Yeah.
That's, by the way, the initial motion of of PLG, or at least the bottom up approach, is stop forcing your product on someone. I mean, if you're able to give them proper value, if you're able to create a proper funnel of who is going to use your product, and then gives them another reason to top up to another layer of your product, it's going to be significantly easier for you to sell, because A, they're already tried your product, they love it, they already know what they're going to get out of it, and they decided to reach out, they decided to ask more questions, they decided they want to move up the funnel. From that point to sell them, I think selling as a word kind of get like a lot of a negative output out of it, but yeah, but the hard truth is, when I want to buy something, someone needs to sell it to me. That is the way it works. There's no other way of doing so. Now, it might be a person, it might be a product, but if I want to buy myself, I don't know, a cup of coffee, someone on the other hand needs to sell it to me. And when I'm paying the money for the coffee, usually I'm thrilled, assuming the coffee is good. Uh, but I mean, if someone is already using your product, he's already onboarding, he's already reaching out, asking relevant questions, and then you say, "Would you like to become a buyer of it?" And they're going to say yes. The only thing you did here, you gave them what they asked for. There's no bad connotation here. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do so. What we're trying to solve here with the bottom up approach, with the PLG approach, is please stop enforcing yourself on someone, stop selling yourself. If someone wants to buy it, you need to find a way to give them proper value. Just the other day, someone reached out over to link me saying, we looked into what you're doing and we think there might be a great business opportunity here. It's like, okay, let's see where that one is going. So what is the business opportunity you were thinking of? So we want to offer you development services. That is not a business opportunity. That is a cold sale. That's, put the correct context here. That is not a business opportunity. So please stop doing that. It's not working.
I completely agree. Like when people shoot me a cold message or people call me without any context, the first thing I do is get annoyed, and then I maybe consider interacting with them for a minute. So things have changed. Asynchronous communication and gradual interaction with products. Try before you buy. That's where we're headed. This is the culture today, and we need to adjust for it. I think it's been too long that I think sales has been getting, as kind of you said yourself, it's getting a bad rap. The sleazy salesman, the car salesman. I remember there's a sketch from the show Taxi that's really old, but with Christopher Lloyd, the guy that played also the Doc on Back to the Future. So he plays a new salesman coming into a woman's house, knocking on the door and like really forces himself in. And once she allows him in, he goes, "Oh, phew! She actually let me in. I can't believe it." And then he starts pitching her a amazing vacuum cleaner, and he wants to be amazing, so he goes in, he takes the ashtray and throws it on the carpet and breaks everything, and he takes ketchup and it just messes up the entire thing. It's a complete mess, and he goes, "But now I'll show you the magic of this vacuum cleaner that's gonna clean everything." And then he opens the bag and he says, "Oh, I forgot, actually I'm selling the encyclopedias today, not the vacuum cleaner." So that's a great sketch, and it shows. I think that's and it's really old. It's like I think from the 70s. I think yeah, and I think it really shows the perception that we have for salespeople in our culture. And I think product led growth is here to save salespeople. It's really here about building good relationships for buying products and not vice versa. And a lot of people think, for some reason, I don't know why, that product led growth is contradictory to sales. It's contradictory to having a sales operation. It's not. It's around building sales with the right alignment. It's around building sales at the right point in time in the way that people want to buy. By the way, for founders listening, if you want to learn more about product led growth, there's a great community that we're running called Upwards. It's already over 300 founders worldwide. The community is exclusively for founders working on product led growth motions. But if you want to join, all you need to do is go to bit.ly, so it's bit.ly/, upwards apply, upwards dash apply, and you can fill up a form and you can join the group.
Yeah. I want to reiterate about the sales motion within the PLG. I think a lot of times it's kind of people think, I either going to do one or the other. First of all, realize that in most PLG companies, especially in those who are enterprise sales, when the company grows, sales become a motion that is the big moneymaker most of the time, given enough years. B, within 2 to 3 years of business operation, you're going to have a full-on sales team. The only big differentiation, they're not going to just willy-nilly send, cold invites. They're going to use everything within your product, everything you're trying to do as a product-led motion business to get those salesperson. You know what? I've seen you have, I don't know, X users, X usage in the product. We might give you like, I don't know, a better deal for 2 years of a contract. What they're going to do is they're going to formalize this business opportunity with the business, trying to give them better deals for better contracts. And that is the essence of PLG, and not saying I'm going to do this bottom up approach from here, and then I'm going to hire 10 salespeople who are going to do cold emails. That is not. I mean, just it's not going to work for you. Exactly. A, it's not going to work for you. B, you're missing the point. C, it's going to cost you so much in the business focus. Just please, you could do a sales-led business. It's perfectly fine if that's the way you want to do that. Just don't try and use both when you're building the business. It's not going to work. Yeah.
All right. So, gentlemen, I really love talking, and I believe that we could continue all this topic about the go-to market strategy and the product-led growth and the authorization or authentication. I mean, we really could dive really and dig into it much longer. But unfortunately, I do need to be respectful to your time. And so, to wrap this episode, I believe that it could be a really great, or if you could maybe briefly share some advice, or maybe a book, or something that just comes to your mind that could benefit to our listeners.
Mm. Yeah, sure. So I'll go to my favorite book, which
The
is
one
The
you're writing.
Selfish Gene. Sorry, not no, not the one I'm writing. I won't be recommending it until it's done. That's my minimum commitment to this, right? Um, but what I wanted to recommend, you kind of in the beginning, you kind of mentioned that I'm kind of a geek and that I'm into a lot of topics. So one of the topics that I really love is biology, and it really inspires me um, to kind of understand the world. Like I think through biology, you can really also understand software development, the iteration of it, the evolution of it, the
Hmm.
recursive aspects of it. And so one of the books that really inspires me in a lot of fields is, as I started to say, is The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. It's
Hmm.
a basically it's a guidebook to understanding biology and specifically genetics and understanding
Hmm.
how all this awesomeness that surrounds us evolves out of nothing, and how it impacts and changes the world we live in today. I really love that book, and the analogies that I've been able to derive out of it into, again, software, business, everything, help me on a day-to-day basis, and I highly
Mhm.
recommend it.
Amazing, amazing. So we will make sure to put it in the show notes as well. I really hope we will remember to do that. But again, I'm really thankful, Tomer, or that you joined and that we could have this conversation. And I really looking forward for our next episodes. I believe that we could dive much into other topics as well, because as I see, you have a great
Sure.
chemistry, and you see you have a great experience and a lot of background and a lot of insight that you could share. But at this moment, I just want to again thank you, and I really love that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on this podcast with you. Till next time.